podcast with Victor Varnado and Roxxy Haze. How to properly format a script with special guests Drea, Andie, Bolt.
What's up, everybody? Hello. I am Dean Victor Varnado. I forgot to put the Dean in front of my name, but trust me, it's there. Also, here we have our Deputy Headmistress Roxxy Haze.
That's me. Hi, everybody.
Roxxy Haze, we're so happy to have you here. It's going to be such a good time. And also, please put your hands together if you've got them for Drea Bolts. A very special guest who is a producer, writer, comedian extraordinaire. So many things she's done. And we're going to talk about two things today. But right now, let's talk about the first thing, which is how to format a screenplay. Well, this is actually not that hard to figure out how to format a screenplay. You can actually just Google how to format a screenplay and people will list specifically how the format goes down. But I do want to talk about very quickly what are the 5 main parts of a screenplay format. And then we're going to talk about what those parts do and what to watch out for when you're putting your script together. And then lastly, the difference between a screenplay format for a spec script and a screenplay format for a shooting script. All right, that's what we're going to be talking about. And so let's go. There are 5 main parts of a screenplay. The 5 main parts of a screenplay are the slug line, which is the slug line is a line which usually describes where the scene is taking place. The action, which is usually a description of the action that is happening. The character name, which is pretty self-explanatory, which is the name of the character. Dialogue, which again, very self-explanatory. And parentheticals, also sometimes called Rileys. You'll know why as soon as we get to describing that more completely. All right. So let's start at the very top with the different parts of the screenplay. The slug line. First of all, the slug line usually starts out with INT or INT period or EXT period, meaning interior or exterior. Also, the slug line is all in caps. Then it is followed by a description of the location. Matilda's house is an example of the location, or the cliff, if that were a location in your movie. Then usually a hyphen, then a description of when the scene is happening, like morning, night, day, evening, dusk. Then there are times when it is not a description of the time, but a description of how it relates to scenes previously. For instance, instead of night or day, it could say continuous, which means that the scene continues directly after the scene that happened before it. Next up, it could also say later. Like, for instance, if a scene happens sometime later after the scene before it, you might put later in the time slot of the slug line. This is funny because for me, and I realize a lot of people don't know this, and I'm sorry for sounding like I'm talking to a 4th grader when I'm saying it, but there was a time when I had to learn the exact same thing, and so I get it. This was a request. I totally understand, so I'm just going to go through this.
I totally get it. I was actually going to chime in here and and what you're saying and give a little description of like why a slug line is needed, because I feel for new writers, this can kind of just click in your mind. Really what this slug line is a communication tool to every single department who is going to read your script. So if you're like the location scout, you're only looking for the exterior scenes today, like you're trying, it's all those little details. It's really not just you want to articulate your story really well, obviously, but then also the reason it's in caps, the reason there's all these very specific things is because they have to, the lighting department has to make sure that they light this continuously from the next scene and that they don't move the lighting because it's the same time, things like that. And then once you're like, oh, it's so other people know how to do their jobs, then it just kind of becomes second nature, You
Yeah,
start
there's
thinking about like, how's the wardrobe department going to read this? You know?
Yeah, there's actually a couple of things that we're going to talk about, especially when talking about a shooting script versus a spec script. By the way, the difference is a spec script, you're trying to usually either communicate your idea or show people that you're a good writer with your spec script. But with a shooting script, often things are formatted even a little bit differently than the spec script because it is about communication. For instance, you sometimes will highlight specific props, or you highlight sound effects by when they appear in the action, they might be capitalized. That's an example of things that happen in a shooting script versus a spec script. And we'll get a little bit more to that later. Let's talk about the action line. Action lines are a description of what is happening in the script. Now, action lines, first of all, they are always in present tense. That's a thing that you should remember, because if you're coming from a narrative writing background, you may always write in past tense, but in a script, mostly it's in present tense. Sometimes people will go back and forth, but that's usually for a more experienced writer. But if you want to make sure you get it right, make your action lines in present tense. Something that happens in spec scripts sometimes, but always in a shooting script, is the first time that a character appears, often their name is capitalized. If the first time the character appears, you're writing them in the action. Like if you're saying Greg walks in, then Greg might be capitalized if they haven't appeared in the script up until that point. Also, sound effects might be capitalized, or specific props might be capitalized, but that's in a shooting script. Okay, but action, basically straight up description of what is happening next. Yes, you have something?
Yeah, and
Drea?
I'll chime in about making it present tense. It's like, yes, there are, exceptions for every rule, but when you get to the end of your script and it's too many pages and you need to cut down pages, I can't tell you how many kind of like first time writers, I'm like, hey, if you just make this present tense, you're going to save like 5 pages of your script. It really does take up a lot of space too. It's like really concise communication. You're communicating and you don't want to bore people, but you don't want to spending their time there. You want them flowing. It's all about keeping the flow going.
Oh, absolutely. That's actually one more thing I want to talk about at the end of this, which is stylistic choices in your script.
Yeah.
We were just talking about characters, or character names. That's the next part we're going to talk about. Character names, very easy. First of all, it's the name of the character capitalized. All right. Now, we're going to talk about formatting a little bit later too, but the character names are capitalized. People often say that the character names are centered. That's actually not true. They're a certain number of inches away from the left margin of the page, but based on that margin, they're actually left. They are left aligned. They're not actually centered. So when people throw out that this is centered or that is centered, it's usually not the case. The reason being is because screenplays originally were written on typewriters, and so they came up with specific points where things were supposed to happen. Everybody did it the same, and it became standardized. So people who say centered, it's not true. It's not centered. You couldn't center with a typewriter unless you had tons of whiteout and time. Next to the character names, often appearing in parentheses, sometimes will be descriptions of where that character's voice is coming from. Usually it's OS or VO. OS stands for off-screen, VO stands for voiceover. People will use them interchangeably. That's wrong. Actually, OS is for if a character is in the scene but not visible. VO is voiceover, meaning the character's not in the scene, and the voiceover could be actually audio taken from a different scene where a character is speaking about something, or just a disembodied voice on top. Although sometimes that is also called narration. But yeah, OS means for off-screen. VO stands for voiceover.
Yeah, OS is great for when you're going to have a character reveal in the scene, you know, like you hear them and then they turn and they look and there it is, you know. And actually that one little thing, Victor, I'm curious your opinion because
Yep.
I've seen it go both ways. Like in my scripts, I want that to be a surprise. So I'll put like male voice OS. And then when I show him, then I'll put like Charles, right? Then I'll reveal that it's Charles. But some writers, you know, they like to put like Charles off screen, you know, because technically, you know what? That's a shooting script.
Yeah, that's a style choice. That's like if you're trying to show someone you're a good writer, storyteller, definitely put male voice OS and then reveal that it's Charlie when the viewer would normally see that it's Charlie. But if it's a shooting script, you don't want wardrobe be like, male voice, who's that? I gotta solve a puzzle? What the hell?
No more puzzles for wardrobe, guys.
Exactly. They want to know it's Charlie.
Oh, sorry, wardrobe.
Then there are parentheticals. Now, parentheticals usually are in parentheses underneath the character name, a little bit indented, and they will do one of two things. Usually they will describe more action that the character may have that may be involved with their dialogue. For instance, a character could be angrily speaking and loosens their tie in the middle of a speech. You might put loosens tie in that parenthetical. Also, parentheticals will help with an intent or an emotion. Sometimes actors say that they hate to see parentheticals describing intent or emotions because they like to derive it from reading the script themselves. Mm-hmm. However, sometimes people will put in, you know, angrily or wryly. In fact, they're often referred to, parentheticals that describe emotion are often referred to as wrylies, because I think that's the number one word that people have thrown into the script, wryly. But again, you will, in fact, a lot of the stuff that I'm telling you, some people will say absolutely never do them in scripts, and some people will say absolutely do this X, Y, and Z. That's only true, I think, for shooting scripts. There are particular ways that people like information communicated to them. But if you're doing a spec script, if you're telling a good story and you're communicating that story well, it's really up to you. Like, don't listen to somebody who is hung up on, oh, you're using scene transitions in your script, your spec script. Don't ever do that. Never. That's not as important as telling a good story. If you're telling a good story that they want, they'll forgive your scene transitions, even if they don't want them later on.
We have a question really quickly.
Okay. Let's hook up that question.
Is there a link to a book on writing a spec script? Or should we get into that for the second half?
I'll tell you my absolute favorite book on writing a spec script. It is Lou Hunter's Screenwriting 434. Lou Hunter's Screenwriting 434 is a great book because it is based on his Screenwriting 434 class that he taught at the University of Southern California. And it is like a workbook. He basically says, do this now, and he does the exercises. And if you follow along, by the end of the book, you have a screenplay. What? I actually used this book to write my very first screenplay, and that spec script got me work. So it's a great book. And nobody was like, you wrote this script wrong. It was exactly right. So Lou Hunter's Screenwriting 434, that is my absolute recommendation.
And it is on Amazon for about $14, so I will be purchasing that today.
Absolutely. I have it on my Kindle, and I also have it in print. Just that's how I roll, everybody. Kindle and print.
I have a book that I liked that helped me with some stuff. Have you ever seen the Now Write series of books? They have Now Write screenwriting. I actually have it up here somewhere.
I have not seen that book.
it's really cool. It's the same kind of thing. It's like a lot of different exercises that help you write your script.
So a shooting script will have, for instance, camera angles sometimes. If you're writing for yourself, especially, you're going to put camera angles in. But if you're passing a script off to a director, the director may want to put camera angles and any sort of instructions that might relate to the camera in themselves. But sometimes people do camera angles within shooting scripts. Sometimes shooting scripts include transitions. Some people reserve transitions only for shooting scripts, but sometimes people will use transitions in spec scripts. A lot of spec scripts start with fade in, and sometimes they end with final fade out. Not 100% necessary, but often in a shooting script, they will delineate what the camera is supposed to be doing or what is supposed to actually appear on screen, so they can give as much information about it to the cast. Like a shooting script, for instance, like a script where a spec script might say montage, Matilda gets ready. A shooting script would say montage, Matilda gets ready. Matilda pulls on her pants. Wardrobe knows that we're going to get pants. She looks in the mirror. Props knows there's a mirror. Shooting script will have all the description of everything that needs to be in the movie physically so people can see it, so that and things that people not necessarily will handle physically, but so that the entire crew and the different departments will know what they can do, because they do what's called a breakdown on a script. And then that is it for the shooting scripts. Let's just talk about stylized scripts. Some scripts are written in what I call a jazzy style. Okay, I write in a jazzy style. Meaning the personality of the writer shines through the script. You can definitely find that in any Tarantino script. Some scripts are more bland, but the way to figure out like how you want to. Some scripts are more technical, I would say, not more bland. They're more technical in that they try to just communicate information. Like an action might be written with only the information about what happens, but a script that is jazzy might write action with an opinion about what's happening as well.
Gotcha. So that was more.
Go ahead.
More narrative, almost, kind of, sort of.
Yeah, it's like a little bit narrative too. It is. It makes it more fun for the reader often, and also creates a personality or gives the script a personality.
Okay.
If I were you, I would look at scripts of movies that you absolutely love and see what those scripts look like, because that will give you an idea about how to communicate the same feelings, like especially scripts of your favorite moments. Like if you got a favorite moment from a film, look and see how that was look and see how much of that was on the page.
You know, I did this recently. I went and looked up Mr. Bean scripts. I wanted to know what those scripts were like. And I tell you what, it was really fascinating because it is all physical comedy. So it's written out kind of like a cartoon, kind of like it was a film script written like a cartoon storyboard, cartoon just like outlines. And then it was so great because it was so funny. I was still laughing because I could imagine it so easily. And there was none of Rowan Atkinson's noises in it. He added all those noises. Rowan did like half the script, But yeah,
That's really funny.
I highly recommend that. It's like you can just Google just about any script out there and go see it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm extremely interested in visual scripting now. For instance, like the most recent Mad Max movie, there was no screenplay. It was all storyboards. And that's actually how a lot of people do, especially very visual stories. I wouldn't be surprised if the Coen brothers are like way more storyboard than script oriented. I mean, definitely they have a script, but it's those movies are so tight visually that I'm sure that the storyboard is paramount.
Yeah, I'll say I was like in a development deal with this A-lister celebrity-owned production company. And when I pitched them the idea for the film, they immediately said, let's get a storyboard artist in here. And we got the guy who did Lego Movie. And this movie ended up not getting made, but I loved that they were ready to collaborate like that because they understood the game. They were like, even if you have a great script, we're going to be communicating a visual world, that we're putting out there. So
as far as format goes, there are a lot of formatting tips that people, you will never have to measure out exactly how many inches from the left margin a character's name should be. Here's what you will do instead. First of all, you can use the free software called Celtx, CELTX, absolutely free. You can write a screenplay. If you're using Google Docs, just Google screen format or screenplay format template for Google Docs. There are 30 absolutely free that can turn Google Docs into a screenplay formatting machine. Then they've already done the 2.5 inches from the left margin is where character names begin. They've already figured all that out for you. I personally use fade-in software. I like fade-in software because you pay one price and you can install it on 3 or 4 of your machines, and it's one price forever. It's not a subscription price. Fade-in, highly recommend. I used to use Final Draft, but now I use fade-in. Is what it is. Final Draft. Too bad.
And it's great to note that it's collaborative with Final Draft. You can put scripts in and out of that. You can all, it's so easy. I've used it on TV shows. I've had showrunners be like, we're all using Final Fade In because Fade In also has amazing customer service. Anytime you have a problem, they'll help you out. They're great. And
Fade In is great. You can write. You can share writing duties and both write in the same script and fade in. And she's right. It does read all of Final Draft files.
We're not even getting paid by them. And we love
them. Not a penny.
Only how good their product is.
Yeah. Fade in is great. Ladies and gentlemen, we've reached the end of the How to Format a Screenplay episode. I hope you got your questions answered. If you didn't, throw them in the comments right now, because we're about to wind up this part and move on to the ins and outs of spec scripting with Drea Bolt. Please look us up at artsacademypodcast.com and altartsacademy.com for the New York Alt Arts Academy. We'll teach you as much as we can about the entertainment and arts.
Please visit altartsacademy.com.